Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky. Welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our good friends over at Torah Anytime, or whether you watch or listen to your podcast, I know a lot of people just listen to them, we are thrilled to have you along for this exciting journey. And this is part 3 of our Aliya series. And we have a sponsor. This show is sponsored anonymously in support of the Daf Yomi class of 2027.5, where there is a crack in everything, and that's how the light of Torah shines through. I'm sure Lenny would not object to the change in lyrics. Thanks for the head up on life. So this is anonymously from a participant in our online Daf Yomi share, and he wants to do this anonymously, but you know, I love you, and I'm so thrilled. He comes to my Daf Yomi, he comes to my Mesilas Yesharim. Obviously, he watches the podcast. A very, very special individual, and thank you so much. And we're talking about moving to Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, we have to decide whether or not this is a move for us. So, I said last week, the first thing is the mindset. It's got to be something that I have to do, not something that it would be cute to do. If that's the case, get a good job in America, make a lot of money, come and stay in a nice hotel, go daven at the Kaisel, have a nice time. When you come in Aliya, you'll be completely burnt up. So this has to be something that you really, really want to do. You really, really want it. Yeah. And if you don't really want it, the problems can sometimes be overwhelming. So now I'm going to deal with one of the biggest things that go into your decision-making process. And that involves you children. You gotta be real. If there's one thing you have picked, I hope that you've picked up from this podcast, is I believe very much you have to be real. You have to be real. Slogans don't work. You gotta be real. What will my children encounter when they move there? Now, I mentioned last time that Americans and Chutznikim in general are sort of an underclass here in Eretz Yisrael. It could be, like I say, if this wave of tens of thousands of Americans come, there'll be a large enough community. Rabbi Bowman Zatzal once said that the biggest problem Americans ever made is that when they came here, they didn't establish their own kehillah. Moroccans are happy to hang around with Moroccans, and Persians are happy to hang around with Persians. They don't feel like they have to give up their identity in order to become part of the Israeli experience. But for some reason, Americans think that unless they move out all by themselves with no other English speakers to Netivot, then they haven't really acclimated. And the emes is that my kids explained this to me. I may have told this story. One of my kids was having trouble in school, and that's a generic enough statement that it doesn't narrow it down to anybody. Many of my kids had difficulties in school. And remember Weinbach got involved to try to help me. And he said to me, but Dovid, the problem is you tried to raise an American family in Eretz Yisrael. I said, you didn't? He says, of course not. We only speak Hebrew in my house. My kids don't speak English. They're like all other Israelis. They hate Americans. They tolerate me. But that's if you can make that transition. I did not. And so, of course, my kids have a certain identity. I heard from Rabbi Orlofsky many years ago that he said he heard from an Adam Gadol that you should always speak a different language in the house than they speak on the street. So your kids know that your house is not the street. He says, when I was in America, we only spoke Yiddish in the house. When I moved to Eretz Yisrael, we spoke English. So since the only language I speak is English, that was one of the reasons I moved to Eretz Yisrael. That was the only way I could speak a different language in the house. I could send my kids, I could speak Hebrew in the house, but then my children would end up in special ed because they'd think there's something wrong with them the way that they speak. And I have tried speaking in Hebrew at different times. I remember one time I said to somebody, I said, well, my dikduk is not so good. He says, that's not true. It's non-existent. Past, present, future, feminine, masculine, first person, third person, it's all the same to you in the same sentence. You can mix everything together. I don't have a head for languages. Yeah. Could be because of my dyslexia, whatever it is, but especially when Hebrew goes in the opposite direction, So it took all of my effort to manage to more or less get a familiarity with English. That's more than enough. But we speak English in the house. My kids are bilingual. They're very comfortable in both languages. My son Yaakov, who has been on my podcast a number of times, he can do what I do in English, but he can also do what I do in Hebrew. He has the words, he has the vocabulary, he has the culture. He can do it over. He started doing his own podcast in Hebrew, but it's hard to catch on. Evidently in Israel, the Orlofsky name doesn't carry the same weight that it does in other places. And my son always says to me, "That's good." He says, because if the Israelis knew all the stuff that you said, there would be pashkavilla up about you every single week, condemning you, attacking you. He says, luckily, they have no idea what you do or what you say, so everybody leaves you alone. Yeah. But so he says, you tried to raise an American family. So my kids explained to me. They said, Abba, you don't understand. It's not a binary choice. It's not either you're an Israeli or you're an American. There is a sug called an American Israeli. And an American Israeli has aspects of both communities. Hopefully they're taking the best from each one. Sometimes they may take the worst from each one. But there's a synthesis. They have an identity that their parents are American. They have an identity that their parents are Israeli. Now, some kids, like I say, come from houses like Rabbi Weinbach, where they've managed to excise the Americanism out of them, and they're just straightforward Israelis. I don't know what happens in the third generation. Yeah, it's a little harder in the third generation to be able to maintain that. But in the first generation, these kids tend to be bilingual. And for the most part, my children married other American Israelis, except for one who married a bona fide American. Yeah. If any of them married a bona fide Israeli, I'd have a lot of fun because my wife's sister moved here shortly after we came. And one of their children married an Israeli who does not speak English. And so at family simchas, I have a tremendous amount of fun at his expense. Because I know he doesn't know what I'm saying. And I, every now and then I'll throw in a Hebrew phrase, to toss him a bone. But there's a sug. So that means if you come here, you're going to be joining a different kind of a community. So right now, because there aren't enough Americans for us to be able to establish our institutions, and that's what Rabbi Bowman said. We should have said we are an American community that's living in Israel. That would have been the best way to do it. And he was very upset about it. When he tried to make Migdal HaEmek, that's what he was doing. He was trying to make an American community in Israel, and he couldn't do it. Yeah, it was too hard. But there are communities that have American shuls or English-speaking shuls or schools that will cater more to Americans. It's changing. But is it cheshbon? Sure, it's a cheshbon. Sure it is. So when I moved here, my oldest kid was 5. Yeah. So you think it would be easy enough. I came with a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 6-month. And yet my kids experience certain difficulties because we weren't Israelis. I spoke about some of them last week, but there's going to be a certain tension that exists. I have seen it too many times, and this has been probably one of the major reasons why people who make aliyah end up going back. Because you find kids who are doing well. They're in Beis Yaakov, they're in a yeshiva, they're in whatever it is, and they're doing fine. And then they come here, and they don't speak the language. And even if they speak the language, they don't know the culture. And they're the odd kid out. You know, I had a daughter who lived here, and then she decided to go for a year to a high school in America. And she called me up and she says, I can't understand it. So I come in and all the girls are like, oh, you're from Israel. That's so nice. Where are you from? Who are you staying with? Do you need anything? Can we help you with this? And that? And she was like, shocked. She said, because if a new girl comes into our class, you know, here in Eretz Yisrael, nobody says hello. The girls all whisper. Now, part of that is part of the Israeli understated mentality that I spoke about. But part of it is that Americans are very open, and we wear our hearts on our sleeves, and we're, you know, and Israelis are not. They're much more closed. And so a kid comes, and do they get bullied? Yeah, kids get bullied. I'm not going to lie to you. Kids get bullied. Not every teacher is open to helping this kid out. One of my children was in a class, and the teacher decided, she called her the Malkat HaAmerikayim, Queen of the Americans, and she took her away from whatever friend she had in the class and moved her to the other class because she's a bad influence. Because what did she do? Did she do anything? No, she speaks in English to her friends. She said, yeah, Malkat HaAmerikayim, we don't need her here. Devastated the poor kid. Don't care. I'm generalizing. Are there gems out there? Yes, they are. But you know how hard it is to find a gem? Much easier to find coal. And so plenty of teachers are not interested. In America, it's pretty clear you're not allowed to hit the kids. in 2020. I had two kids in Cheder. They were beaten up by the Rebbeim. One of my sons got smashed against his head against the wall. Another one had his head smashed against the railing and got an eye infection. I have neighbors, nice people, moved here, you know, sent the kid to a cheder, and there's this fellow there who has a position, and he smacked the kid into a thing. He lost a tooth. It was like. So he started calling up the other parents, saying that you can't have this guy here. So he got an anonymous call from somebody in the school who said, listen, we're not going to fire him, but you keep this up and your kid will be thrown out and will never go to another school. I said, so what'd you do? He says, we just kept quiet. It's unbelievable. I mean, well, I'm going to tell you, these things don't happen. They do happen. Now, again, I don't know what the educational system is like in America these days. It could be that Rebbeim also beat the kids. It could be that teachers are also nasty to the girls. Could be. I don't know. But here, somebody told me they were in their building, walking through the staircase, and these two teachers are sitting there talking about the different girls by name. This is this is that. She's like this, she's like that, you know, and they have all kinds of terrible things to say. Because as I mentioned last week, everything here works by protexia. Rabbi Peleg, who is the Rav of Shaare Tzedek Hospital, told me that when he was starting a high school, he was hired to start a high school many years ago. So he only wanted teachers with some level of experience for a high school. So this girl called up. She was a young girl. And she wanted a job teaching. So he said, do you have any experience? And she said, my grandfather is so-and-so. He says, very nice, but we only want teachers with experience. He says, later that day, I got a call from the grandfather. And he said to me, you're going to hire my granddaughter or it's going to be very bad for your school. I said, what'd you do? He said, I hired the grandfather. We had a principal of the elementary school. I guess she got her job through Protexia too. But at one point, she said to my wife, which you're not supposed to say, she said the quiet part out loud. She says, look, it was a problem with one of the teachers. She says, look, there's only so much I can do because the teachers know they don't have to listen to me because they all get their jobs through Protexia and there's nothing I can do about it. So that's a problem. It's a problem. So if you're thinking of coming and you have children who are above the, who are already toilet trained, or 3 years old, either one, I don't really care which one. I'm not here to get involved in your personal business, but your kids are already over 3. Obviously, the younger you come, better it is. You have to look into what your educational options are and do not move unless you first come and see what's going on and understand what your educational options are. And Baruch Hashem, they have changed dramatically in the past 32 years when I made Aliya. And there are schools, because since there are so many Americans who have moved here, there are schools that are designed to accommodate Olim and accommodate new people moving here. But you have to, don't leave it to chance. Don't leave it to chance. There is a very high percentage, I don't have the numbers. Jonathan Rosenblum wrote a column about this once. I think he has the statistics of people who make Aliyah and their kids were doing great in their country of origin. They were happy in school, they had friends, and they suddenly move here and they go off the derech. Because there's only so much rejection a person can handle. Not me, I can handle an endless amount of rejection. I met a psychologist once. I said, I think I have an inferiority complex. He says, no, you're inferior. But, there's only so much that the average kid can handle. So make sure before you come in, that's what people ask me. I have kids. And like I said this 2 weeks ago. Rabbi Bowman, Rabbi Orlofsky, somebody quoted to me, I didn't hear it from them directly, would tell people that they should not move here. You should not move here if you have kids, so teenagers or preteens, whatever the age was. And I said, it depends. I taught in a seminary where girls would ask me about moving to Israel, and making Aliyah. And I would discuss the pros and cons with them. And they said, because there's this other rabbi who's teaching here who said, no American girl should move here. And I said, how can I tell that to somebody? How can I tell that to somebody? And I would, or from my own perspective, and a few years later, I happened to meet this teacher, and he says, I hear you tell girls that they should make Aliyah. I said, depends on the girl. I don't think any girls should make Aliyah because this problem, that problem, this problem, that. I said, I understand. But some people, they're not going to be sholem unless they're in Eretz Yisrael. Does it carry a certain risk factor? Yes, it does. And I have met families who moved here and they were gung-ho. And as they watched their children becoming damaged, they picked themselves up and went back. So the first consideration, if you have children, is what are your educational options? That's number one. And that's the first thing you have to work on. The second thing you have to work on is can I make a living? There was a young man who said to me that he was learning, and he wanted to stay in learning and get married. And he spoke to a bunch of people. They all told him, you have to be talking, you have to be talking. He says, but every one of those people who told me you have to have bitachon have an outside income from something else. Nobody's just sitting and learning, getting the little bit of money they give you from the government, and with a little bit of they give you, they all have money from someplace else. So I've met nobody who just gives you the speech about bitachon who actually is living on nothing. I used to have girls from the Rabbi Yerushalayim who used to come over. And when they would get engaged, they'd sometimes bring their chassan over for a Shabbos meal. And I did what my father-in-law did when I came to meet him. And he said, how do you intend on supporting this young lady? So I had asked this to the guys. They said, bitachon. I said, that's great. Did you make that arrangement over at the Makolet and said that when the bill comes due at the end of the month, they should send it to God? And they would get flustered. They said, Papa, my Rebbeim, tell me. I said, oh, your Rebbeim are going to pay the bills at the end of the month? No, but you expect the money to fall out your front door? I mean, you're a nice guy. I don't know if you're tzaddik on that level. And in all the years I was doing this, only one time I said, so how are you going to live? And he says, I get this much from yeshiva. I don't have this. I took over the dry cleaning business in the yeshiva, and I get a percentage from that. I'm going to tutor a kid, and my wife's going, this is how we're going to do it. I was so impressed. Because when it comes to parnasa, so if you have no safety net, there was an old joke. When I came here in 1969, they were already telling this joke. How do you get $1 million in Israel? Come with 2 million. Things are expensive here. It's remarkable how expensive it is. I went to America. I went to a supermarket. I did a whole shopping. It's a fraction of what it costs here. A fraction. Things are expensive. I had a 2-family house in Far Rockaway with a basement and a deck and a yard. And I sold that and added on money to buy myself a 3-bedroom apartment. Yeah. So you got to be real. Now you have to have a certain amount. Everybody has to have bitachon. Let's yeah. There's no way to predict everything. No matter how much money you've saved up, nobody can have enough money if chas v'shalom there's a catastrophic illness. We have to take a medicine that's $1,000 a pill. It'll devastate you. Devastate you. So everybody has to have a certain amount of bitachon. But how am I going to make a living? And I'm talking about people who have nice jobs in America. And they come here. And sometimes they can transfer it over, and sometimes they can't. So you have the phenomena that is not uncommon among people who come from America, and that is that the husband commutes. He goes to America, he works, and then he comes back. Or as one of these wives once said, we have shalom bayis. Shalom bayis. I met some of these people. They're in perpetual jet lag. Now, not every family does that well without a father. Some families do better with I remember hearing this comic once. He says, I left my room. I was just trying to walk across the living room without making eye contact with everybody. And I noticed my kid sticking a fork into the light socket, the electrical. I felt like I needed to intervene. There was this woman who wrote a song called the Mom Song. Everything that a mom says, in the course of a day. And she said it to the William Tell Overture, right? Get up now, get out of bed, brush your teeth, wash your sleepy head. Even hear a word I said, get up now, get up out of bed. Stop crying or I'll give you something real to cry about. Oh, and it goes on like this, all these things. So afterwards she said, people said, why don't you write the dad song? You wrote the mom song. He says, okay. And they go, dun, 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 dun. Ask your mom. Okay, there's they used to tell a story. I'm sure it's apocryphal, but this father was in Kailo. He would learn mamash from morning to night. Yeah. And when he left, the kids weren't up yet. And when he came home, the kids had already gone to school, whatever it was. When he came home, the kids were already in bed. So the only time he saw them was Shabbos. So one time, one of the kids was misbehaving. He gave him a punch. And the kid goes running over to his mother, goes, Ima, that man who comes here every Shabbos just hit me. So, okay. But it's so hard to have your business in America. I knew a fellow who was a doctor. And that's what he would do. He would travel. He had a practice. It's a little tricky to do. Luckily, he was an anesthesiologist. You don't have to develop much of a relationship with your patients. In fact, the less, the better. I remember as I was being wheeled into my surgery, the anesthesiologist came over to introduce himself. And he goes, oh, Rabbi Orlofsky, because I listened to all your shiurim. I said, do I put you to sleep? He says, no. I said, don't return the favor. Make sure I'm out. But, so he goes, he works, he comes back. I know people who are lawyers. I know people who are accountants. I know people who are have businesses. And they go back and forth, flying a lot. One fellow I know, his leg used to swell up from being on the plane so much. He was in perpetual jet lag. I asked Leib Kellerman once. He used to fly back and forth to do these groups. And I said, how do you deal with the jet lag? He says, I don't. I always stay, in jet lag, like the whole time. I don't even try. I have no circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm. It's a very rough lifestyle. Trust me, I know, because I don't even travel. And I don't travel at all, but when I used to travel, so sometimes I would go every single month. And it's hard, My wife said to me once, can you not make so many trips? I said, sure. Can you get the kids to stop spending so much money? She says, I'll see you when you get back. So, what are you going to do? I'm limited in this country because I don't speak Hebrew. And surprisingly, a lot of people in this country do. So I'm left to teaching Americans. And the American yeshivas and seminaries don't pay their teachers a lot of money. You can look into it if you like. So there was this Rebbe who was a very popular Rebbe in one of these 2-year yeshivas for Americans. And he did what many people have done over the years. He took out a pencil and a paper and he says, X number of students paying X number of dollars equals, oh my gosh, these people are making a fortune and they're paying me nothing. So he went into the office and he asked for a raise. And they said to him, you're a very good Rebbe. You're very effective. We would be very sad to lose you. But if you quit, we can find a better Rebbe and pay him less money. So the Rebbe said, thank you very much, and went back to the base medrash. Because one thing there is no shortage of here are rabbis, American rabbis. There are a lot of them. And there aren't that many positions. And if I wasn't such a coward, I would have opened my own yeshiva, because it's a yeshiva that I really want to open. But fundraising is terrifying, terrifying. I've worked for institutions where I was months and months behind on my salary. I'd say to the Rosh Yeshiva, I can't go on like this. And he would pull out a lottery ticket and say, this Tuesday, I'm going to pay you all of your back salary with a bonus. And I said, that's not called a sound fiscal approach to paying your rebellion. But, it's a challenge. Government bureaucracy here is legendary. Legendary. There was a Dry Bones, and it's better. It's a lot better. There was a Dry Bones cartoon. This guy was working for the Sochnut, and they announced, we're going to have a work slowdown. The guy thinks, and he says, I can't work any slower without coming to a complete stop. There's a certain mindset that you have to. I think I told the story. I may have told the story recently. I went to open a bank account. Now, when you open a bank account in America, so you come and you say, I want to open a bank account, and everyone's like, yeah, sure, come here, Fine. Hi, I'm Mrs. Wilson. Fill out these forms. Fine. You want to pick out your checks? Would you like one with mountain scenes, seascapes? What would you like? Would you like your initial on it? What number would you like the check to start at? Now let's pick out your check holder. Do you want leather? Do you want the Western look? Do you want elephant hide? I went for the elephant hide, of course. And by the way, here's a toaster. I went to open up an account, and I say, where do I go? They say, you go over there. So there's a guy. There's nobody online. He's reading the paper, drinking coffee, smoking a cigarette under the no smoking sign. And I stand by his desk. He goes, Ma Torotzeh. I said, Ani rotzeh liftoach cheshbon. I want to open the account. He says, Lopo. Okay. So I go, window, person, upstairs, downstairs, and finally it turns out it is his job. He just didn't feel like it. Forget about a toaster. So I get back online. There are 3 people there. And there are businesses and institutions, less and less, where they close between 1 and 4 in the afternoon. Yeah, because you have to go home and have a schnitzel and take a nap. And it's like, certain mentality. Anyway, back online, there were 2 people in front of me, and he looks up and goes, Ma Torotzeh. I said, Ani rotzeh liftoach cheshbon. He said, it's all right. I can't do it now. Come back in the afternoon. And I almost did, being an American. And then I realized I'm being taken advantage of. And so I put on that face that I used to use at junior NCSY Shabbatonim when people were misbehaving. And I said, Ani rotzeh liftoach cheshbon. And he said to me, Beseder. In a bank. So 2 years later or whatever it was, I wanted to open one in my local branch. Same thing. The same exact thing. I go to the woman who's supposed to be in charge. She says, no, I don't do it. And so I said, I went to 2 other 3 other people. They said, no, it's her job. She says, Yom Shishi Yevsha. I can't do it on Friday. So, okay, I had been here already for 2 years, and I had learned how things work. And I held up my check in the middle of the bank, and I said, Mishu rotzeh et hakesef sheli. Yesh mishu hu po sherotzeh et hakesef sheli. Ani yachol liftoach cheshbon. So the guy says, okay, come over here. I have to beg you to take my money, please. Please take my money. And then you get a bank statement. 18 pages. With tiny little writing and formulas. Frankel, who was the head of the Bank of Israel, said, there's something wrong when I'm the head of the Bank of Israel and I can't read my bank statement. I don't understand what it's saying. So you have to know, right? How am I going to take care of my kids? Education. And how am I going to make a living? Now, my go-to response is speak to Nefesh B'Nefesh. They are officially in charge now of Aliya, and there are many knowledgeable and helpful people there. I know some of them. And they'll walk you through, if you're in this profession, if you're in that profession, what you need for this, what you need for that, you know. There are certain people who actually, after the year of yeshiva and seminary, have a plan, and so they go into a position that they know is going to do well. So one of my children is very artistic. All my children are talented in many different ways, but this one happens to be into art. And she wanted to become an art therapist. So, wow, it's great, you know. There's a glut of art therapists. They can't get jobs. Because there are people who are established, there are no more jobs, no openings. So you have all these girls every single year graduating as art therapists that can't get a job. So does anybody anticipate that? Someone said to me, so what business makes money here? And there's no question about it. And I'm speaking from experience and being here for 32 years. Sponger, wash floors. You'll make a fortune. That's where the real money is. And people will pay you anything. My doctor, right, once put up on his door. When you give your card, it's for a Rivon. It's for 3 months. Yeah. He says, and people come during those 3 months a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. He says, on each visit, I make 17 shekels. Each person who comes. And now they changed one of the other rules, and that is only the doctors can make the prescription. It used to be that the secretaries could print out the prescriptions and he just had to stamp it. Not anymore. He has to type everything into the computers, do everything and print it out, and yeah, do everything yourself for your 17 shekels. We had 2 wonderful pediatricians here in Harnof, and they've both retired. But one went to Harvard Medical School, and the other one went to Einstein Medical Schools. They were brother-in-laws. Wonderful, wonderful people, and very good. Anyway, this friend of mine, his kid was sick with this, that. He went to him something like 12 times that month. He says, if you're in America, you know how much this would have cost you? He says, for your 17 shekels, you've been here already 12 times. He says, what do you want from me? You're a Zionist. You decided to move here. It's your tough luck. You should have stayed in America. You'd make a lot of money. Gosh, that's why they have a big problem here, that people go to the medical schools and then they move to a country where they can make more money. Socialized medicine. Doctors don't make as much as you might think. 17 shekels a visit. So those are the 2 considerations. I spoke last week. The first thing you need is the mindset. You have to know for sure what you want. And the second thing is you have to make sure that you can accommodate for your children and make sure that you have a way of making a living. There are no guarantees. You could lose your job. There could be a virus that comes into the world and everybody has to close down and they can't work. Anything can happen. Yeah. I have a daughter. She's been looking for the profession where she can make a good living, and she wanted to do this. She looked into that. You know, turns out what her information is, and this is not authoritative. I'm just sharing you what she shared with me. Cybersecurity. And I'm like, you have to beat a hacker, and then you try to hack into different places and do all kinds of nifty stuff like that, and close down the Iranian, nuclear facility and all kinds of cool stuff like that. Stop them from closing down our port, which they did at one point. I don't know if that works or not, but this is what she decides she's going to go into it. But you have to look into it. I can't tell you. I'm in a very specialized field. Yeah, I used to anyway travel around and tell funny Torah speeches. That's a very small niche. Not too many people have that niche. So so I don't know how many openings there are in that particular line of work. Yeah. But those are the two considerations you need. And we will deal with other issues that you have to the next time. So that's it for now. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to RabbiOrlofsky.com, my website. You can send me an email. You can comment on the episode. You could sponsor an episode. And that's it for this week. I'm Dovid Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.